So this one's called From Zero to Twitter Bootstrap and Zerb Foundation on a Rails backend. From zero, that's zero previous experience. So the plan was just from scratch, and it was given to me by the seed was sown by Michael. So the components, Rails, I'd never done anything with Rails before. I'd been to one of Michael's Rails presentations, and it looked pretty fascinating. I'd heard about it, but I'd never done anything myself. Twitter, and actually working with it, I was just being amazed at how powerful it is and how well it works. There's so many moving pieces to this, and it just astonished me. That's why I said it was an eye-opener. Twitter Bootstrap and Zerb Foundation, they're front-end frameworks. They're really very heavily used in rapid development, but you can build a very solid site with it, and lots of people do. As you'll see, lots of familiar elements. And I think after a while you can recognize, who uses Bootstrap and who uses Foundation. But anyway, so that's what they are. Those are the moving pieces. So the instructions from Michael, he was like, well, let's do this. And he wrote a little wiki that's actually in the GitHub repository that you can see. Basically, it says 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. So I installed Rails 4.0. I got the latest version. I'm new to it, but I didn't realize that a lot of people aren't actually on Rails 4.0. I set up a new project called Art Cards that will be familiar to some of you here. And I built my artist model. I put a first name, a last name, a description, a small image name, and a large image name in the database. Migrated the database and ran the server, and it worked. Now this was after, those other points that I just mentioned there. That's quite a lot of work, and you see, and it's all on the command line, and lots of things go whizzing by. But I'm actually. In this presentation, I'm not going to try and just gloss over everything that's done, because that always, when you go to a presentation, that just looks like magic, and it looks like something that you can't do. The main thing I want to convey here is this is all very doable, and well, we'll see where we got to, and you see what you think. So I created a Bootstrap branch. After I'd done all that stuff on master, I created a branch to put the Bootstrap stuff on, and I installed the Bootstrap Rails gem, and I actually we just take a quick look at that. Ta-da! Right, there we go. This is so I put this little comment in, and I put these 3 lines in here. So basically, I'm using the Twitter Bootstrap Rails gem. There are a number of gems that you could use. This one is, I picked it because it seemed like it was the most true to Bootstrap itself, in that it uses less instead of SCSS. Which is basically which is the CSS preprocessor that's used with Ruby and Rails. So that's why you see the less Rails gem is also in there, and the Ruby Racer is a JavaScript accelerator, I suppose, but it's that's also required. So these end up being dependencies. Okay. So basically you just put it in there, you run the bundle, and then you run Bootstrap install. And it's as simple as that. basically, I did that. I actually then ran a Bootstrap version of my. It changes the fonts. That's about all you can see until you actually go and do something. And I'll give you some examples of that. So I had put two fields in my database just to store the image file names. And I realized I didn't know quite where I was going to store those. I didn't know enough about Rails. I figured that I would store them in the assets directory or something like that, somewhere external to the database, and I just keep references to them in there. And then I started looking around about how you stick images in, and I found this thing called Paperclip. And then I remembered Michael said, "Oh, I just use Paperclip." So I was like, maybe I should use Paperclip. So moving back to the master, I added the Paperclip gem. I ran the Rails Paperclip install, and then I did the adding the two fields that are Paperclip. They're now Paperclip fields to the database, and I migrated the database, and then I had to edit a couple of the files, like artist.rb. I had to insert, I had to say that I had attachments, and I edited the form HTML stuff and the show HTML stuff. Actually, I think I have a demo. But one of the things I found here was that I could actually run, and I could load my images into the database, or the image pointers into the database, and but I couldn't actually see any images with my files. And this ended up being one of those things that I lost about 4 hours on. So everything had just gone flying along wonderfully until then. It took a couple of hours of reading to find out that I needed to edit artist controllers RB, right? And this was because there have been some changes made in the way that access control is in Rails 4.0. And so all the documentation tells you to do some stuff that actually doesn't work in 4.0 anymore. And so I ended up having to know a hell of a lot more about how Rails works than I knew as a beginner, which is what took all the time. Anyway, did resolve that. So with Paperclip, it also has this wonderful thing where you can just give it one image, and you can tell it all the sizes you're going to want to use, and it converts the images to those sizes. And this utility is called ImageMagick. So you have to also install ImageMagick, and you also have to tell Rails where to go find it. And well, actually, you have to tell Paperclip where to go find it. And so let's do a demo of that. Okay, check out master. And let's run the Rails server. And let's bring up a browser window and connect to our Rails server. Localhost 3000. Actually, if you just do this, oops. You can do it. Yay. Did I close that window? So this is kind of interesting because you can see some stuff about your application environment here. So it tells you like what version you're on and all that kind of stuff, which is quite nice. But I told you the project was it's called Art Cards, but the the database was artist. So let's run this.
Yeah,
All right.
the Y is.
So this is what Rails gives you.
It's historical.
It says preview test.
Oh, yeah.
I lost my audience, didn't I? Well, it was my own. It was my own fault.
It's a meetup page. Yeah, you don't even have to say meetup. Well, they're not. How did you get all this data?
I did this.
Oh, man. Copy and paste.
Yeah. And then I chose an image file. You know, so
Cool, thanks. There's some time right there.
actually, I just went ding, ding, ding. I thought, oh well, I'll just do 10. You know, there's like what 40 or 50 there. I'll just do 10. And I was thinking, you know, there's probably a nice little script that, you know, I could write. I could go spend another week and learn how to write a script to put them in. But so to do 10 of them took me about 15 minutes. Just copy and paste, because of course then I had the right windows open and I just copied the images and the big thing, the artist statement, which does not fit into that little box, of course. Anyway, so if we just go back, so
Do you have a database now? You can export that to CSV or something.
So we have a CSV.
Yeah.
With-
I mean,
Yeah.
I think you can probably convert the CSV to YAML, and then you can just load it in the command line.
So this was the out of the box.
Out of my,
this is out of the box. Yeah. So
yeah.
so a few 10 minutes ago, this is what I wanted to show you. So this is pretty much out of the box. The only thing I changed was I realized that those two fields that I stuck in the database for the names of the files weren't going to work, and that's when I did the paperclip thing. So then I removed those two fields, two columns from the table, and I inserted this image column. So I just ended up editing the HTML to stick the thumbnail-sized image straight into this page. So that's the only thing that I did that you don't get for free with this, because you don't actually see an image, because paperclip, basically you have to add a few lines of code in to say that paperclip's managing these, and here's an image tag, and here's the image, right? So that's all I did. And the same thing on this page, on my show page. So if we actually looked at the show HTML, which now I'm nervous every time I go to the command line. Let's yeah. Let's see. CD app. So everything's in the app, and everything is in the view in the app. Oh, no such view. He said with confidence, views. All right, and then if we look in there, you see there's artists is the name of the table. And these are the HTML files. So the first thing that you saw, I think, is, oh, let's look at show. So open. Oh, show HTML. Okay, so if we look at that, this is all I needed to add, basically. Just say the image tag. I'd called the table field small image URL, and because I got it to do all the resizing for me when I imported it, it actually resizes when you run paperclip, when you actually set up, yeah, when I do the create, it'll actually do the resizes then. So I actually had 3 sizes, which you saw. Okay.
That's great about you running into strong parameters like that. Yeah, I think it's something that's
that thing, couple of hours, the strong parameter thing, was basically because that apparently used to be a gem and now is part of the core. Just as somebody who's starting off, and that's really what this presentation is about. It's like, okay, how easy is this to do if you don't know anything? And it's those kinds of things where you suddenly find you have to know like about this whole little world. So you have to go and read a bit. So there are only 2 of those things that happened in the whole of this process, though. There's a lot of stuff, you know, to learn, but there's a lot of great resources, which I'll show you in a minute.
It's good. I mean, you really, like, you know, having to learn this, maybe they could have made it, the documentation easier to find or whatever. I'm not sure how much searching you had to do in order to find it, but
Well,
you know, now you know about the security thing that you had to be.
well, I had to do enough searching in that I'm going to send a message to there's an RDoc for installing paperclip, right?
Okay.
And how to use it. And it's not this particular, it looks like it's updated because the last touch of it was 2 days ago or something like that. But it's got the wrong information for how to do this on Rails 4. So I was going to just send them a message and say, you know, this is an update for Rails 4. It's just a one other line because all the other stuff is relevant for Rails 3.
You could update the README and make a pull request saying, hey, I made an adjustment that
Could
actually
do.
works.
I could do.
that
That'd be
you can
great.
contribute.
I should do. All right. So the other thing I was trying to do was not call Michael, right, in all of this. And I managed right up to the stupidest thing, which was because I did this by installing Rails, having all that on master, and then doing a branch, getting Twitter Bootstrap working on that branch, and then going back and going, oh, I need to sort out my images. So then putting on the master, putting paperclip and ImageMagick, and then doing a merge to my branch from master. Now, I was doing all this command line, and I don't think I would have had any trouble at all if I was doing this on Xcode. But on command line, I ran into a gem file lock conflict, and I panicked. And that's when I finally called Michael. I was like, what about this gem file lock thing? You know? And he was like, oh, all you have to do is just the merge. And it's actually puts all the little arrows inside the lock file, and I could see exactly what it was as soon as I opened it and looked at it. I thought it would be some kind of like mystery database lock file. I didn't realize it was like human readable file there. And so made those couple of changes, but that's the only time I called Michael in this whole process.
So the original files that you had that were laid out there, app, and you said we got to go down into here.
Yeah.
That is the foundation, or you know when you used to call it scaffolding?
Yeah, when you generate the scaffolding,
Did you do that?
I generated the scaffolding for the application, right?
Just
So
by-
that's
did you show-
basically saying that we have artist,
Oh, I
table,
see.
and it has these fields, basically.
So in the schema description, that started it rolling to give you what you needed to just get that edit, delete, new record, that kind of thing.
Right, because things like that underscore form there and stuff like underscore form HTML, it actually puts, well, it puts a little thing that says, I don't know, yield or something like that, which then goes and works out what's in the database and feeds you all the data. So it actually, all of that sort of framework gets set up for you. So you don't need to do anything. And the only time I needed to touch it was when I wanted to explicitly put images in or change something around, right? And so what I've done here is try to give it like the minimum amount of touching to produce, you know, to show you basically what you get out of the box. The only awkwardness there was with paperclip, all right, which also turned out to be the biggest time sink. But it needn't be, especially when I update the RDoc.
Help everybody else.
Okay, so so what I did with Bootstrap just gave you something that looked pretty similar to that, except the fonts were different. And you don't really get anything from Bootstrap until you run this. So I did a Rails generate Bootstrap layout application fixed. Bootstrap has a 12 column grid system which it works on, and you can have it fixed or floating, or variable, or whatever they call it. Floating, I think they call it. If it's floating, it will always go as wide as the browser is. If it's fixed, fluid, that's it. If it's fixed, it's a little more constrained, and it goes to the default of, I don't know, it's probably like 960 pixels wide or something like that. So let's just take a look at what came out after I did that. And it takes a while. It's doing a massive amount of work actually to start the database server up. Okay, so now let's just look at this. So this, just from doing that generate, did this. Well, not quite. I did actually add this menu, this nav bar on the top and this little sidebar. But basically, see, it has different fonts. I mean, basically, what you saw beforehand would have been just a page that looked like the other one, you know, completely spread across. But this one, and these are, you know, working links if you actually link them to something. But this is the thing. Make this small, and oh, look, as soon as you get a certain size, you get your menu taken care of, your nav bar taken care of, and make it small enough to be an iPhone, and scroll down, and you'll see that that little sidebar thing got stuck at the bottom. So it'll work on any size device. What do they call that, Brooks?
Responsive.
They call it responsive. That's what. Thank you very much, Jim. Yeah, it's called responsive. It's funny because they don't use the word responsive at all in the documentation for. Yeah, for. They do. They're all going so simple. All right. I'm going to try not to keep you too long. I don't want to. So. I created the foundation branch. This was like after doing Bootstrap. Bootstrap's using less. Foundation's using SCSS. And so it's super easy. And in fact, their install, I like the documentation on Foundation better. It's definitely, to me, it suited me better. And I know everybody's different about the way they like their stuff written down. But it was super easy to do that. In fact, it was 2 o'clock this afternoon. I'd written this presentation just with the Bootstrap stuff in it. And I was like, okay, I'll see if I can get the Foundation stuff in as well. And so from 2 o'clock this afternoon, I got Foundation in. I got it like working, you know, nicely. I've got a question for Brooks actually. And then I added it to the presentation. So it really didn't take that long at all. But I'd had the massive learning curve of Rails and Bootstrap beforehand. So I just used the Rails Foundation gem. It's a new one. There was one that was called something like Zerb-Foundation, and that. But this one's for 5.2, I think, is their current version. I made a couple of mods to add a grid layout and a nav bar, and you know, unfortunately, You've already seen it, but
I forgot what it is.
but I have to.
Sounds like you gotta go back and forth. Now let's
Yeah,
taste the
that's
Pepsi.
right. Okay, so if I check out foundation.
Kill your server. Basically cleans up.
So that you can do it without killing the server.
Oh, okay.
I think I can actually, but after the last little snafu,
They're
I
using
was.
the same database, right? You're not swapping under the hood.
No,
I
I think I'm using the same database. It might be looking for those image files in the directory that's part of the foundation directory structure, right? So that's why the other thing didn't work.
yeah.
So we should be able to leave the, let's try it.
Yeah, really.
I've got so many experts sitting around, it doesn't matter if it doesn't work,
Everything's
then
read
I'm
at
sure we can
runtime,
fix
I mean,
it.
at runtime, so
Yeah, in the development
it's
environment.
resourcing.
Right, if you were in the real world, you couldn't do this.
No, because you
It'd
would
be-
have to have
it would
pushed
be
it. in.
caching. yeah.
If I was in the real world, right. What'd I do with my browser? Ah, here we go. All right, so if we just refresh this, let's see what happens. Okay, yeah, we have to clean it. No, well, actually, yeah, I think we have to kill the server.
At 4:30 today, he decided he wants sprockets in
I
this
think Sprossa is what the asset pipeline is
Yeah.
based on.
thing.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that pipeline.
let's just start the server again.
I always use this. We call it
You always restart the server?
Unless they're
I think that sounds like a good practice. In reality,
I don't even mess around with services. I just reset the whole server.
Okie dokie.
Your systems admin. Yeah. Just take down the server.
All right.
Cool. Yeah, no worries.
Now,
It's under a million that we're using.
so I have to
Just
say,
reboot all computers.
Yeah, yeah. If it lose more than a million.
if I was to pick, like just from my, well, I've only had a couple of hours with Foundation, and I've probably had to like 6 hours with Bootstrap. I like Foundation better, and one of the things, because I'm a sucker, I think, for things that look beautiful, the font here is just. This is the default font. It's absolutely beautiful. I don't know what that font is. I think it's their own.
And
Their own
it's
version.
flat on the bottom.
Oh,
with S, right?
It's
Right.
it's
like
super, but
based
it
on
it's
some of the-
elegant and light and
Yeah.
just really nice. And a lot of the things that you get, I mean, Foundation out of the box comes out flatter than Bootstrap does, which doesn't always look good. I think things can go too flat. That's definitely something that Brooks is always
I
saying.
think Zerb is a development firm. They design also, and that's
This
the
is-
difference between Twitter and Zerb is that
Right.
consultancy.
And so, from a designer perspective, to me, this one wins hands down. But the thing that I really like too, and I'll show you this in a sec, is the documentation is just so clear and straightforward. And so like adding these things was super easy. So I added an av bar, and I added the sort of art tour description thing. So I used, I think, nine of the 12 columns for that, and then the rest for the art tour. And so if we actually scroll down this, it didn't put a button where new artist was and stuff like that, but that's easy enough to fix. And if we look at the show, let's look at somebody else. I like this one. I like this one.
That came out
But,
nice.
Yeah. I mean, it's just beautiful. As I said, I really haven't done anything. I didn't even have a time to do anything to this. So. But the one thing, Brooks, are you watching?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
It
it
collapsed
actually
it,
does
but it
the-
didn't give me the little pizza slices to do.
In the menu, the hamburger menu.
Yeah. So, but, it did actually collapse it
I think I saw
properly.
it there for a sec. Or,
You did?
yeah. Come back. When you went in,
Yeah,
I saw
think-
something there for a second, but maybe that's not the right
What are you
thing.
talking about, hamburger?
The
little-
I'm talking about the little thing that gives
Some
me.
way to access
See,
the
I've-
toolbar.
Three lines stacked up,
the
bring down
a
Yeah.
drop-down menu.
Oh, okay.
That
So
would be
what's
the
All talking
the
to
rest of the nav
CIs.
bar. So the nav bar does that as part of its
Yeah.
magic.
Yes, in fact, it's supposed to, and if we'll look at their site in a second, and you'll see. And most of the time I spent on Foundation today, I spent trying to find out where my little, little hamburger thing was.
Do you have menus in the? Okay.
I just did an example of one drop down. Putting a nav item on this side. This is actually a title here. But
Very nice.
okay.
The S3 image system, you can actually, it could use, when you upload, and Paperclip works with it, so like when you upload an image, you can say, put it to S3, and I want to store my images in the cloud, and then, you can select an S3 to use a distributed platform for images, so it caches the images based on the location where the client is requesting it. So if I'm in California, like on Trekkaroo, like all those California images are going to be cached in California, but the New York images are going to be cached in New York. So when you're talking about the network of computers going through and grabbing stuff, S3 is much more efficient.
So it's funny because I was looking at that just before it came out. So I just happened to be on that page.
All right.
But the power of I guess that's one of the things that came out of this for me that I said in the beginning. The power of this stuff is just unbelievable. And the fact that I could do this with no knowledge, starting out with zero knowledge basically, and be able to put something like this together is just astonishing. But in my looking around, I found stuff like this, and it's like, oh my God, yes, I need some training.
Okay.
But you could build a serious,
So here's
build
the
some serious
question.
applications.
So is this a bootstrap or a foundation
Let's look at that.
Foundation. Let's see what happens when I collapse this down. Actually, let's.
Or
You
let's
could
look at
probably inspect the
let's look at
elements
the source
find
and
where
see
the
if it-
style is
Yeah.
going.
No, that's the easy thing to do. I'll tell you. Like, depend.
Oh yeah, he's gonna use the
Oh, they're
heuristics he
limiting it.
found.
They're limiting it.
Oh, they're.
They don't want
Yeah,
you to use the
they
little
don't
font.
want you using this on mobile, which actually you can do. Okay, so let's just finish this. We're almost at the end.
You consider
Thank you for
like
sitting
your-
through. I put all this on GitHub, and I will put the slides up here too, because the slides also have these links, which are on the next page. And let's see. You know all this stuff. And these are the resources these were the fantastic resources I used. Of course, the guide for Ruby on Rails, so rubyonrails.org is amazing. I've used this word already. Ryan Bates is incredible. This guy makes this subject very easy to listen to, and this Railscast 328 was actually done probably a couple of years ago, because this was done in this Railscast 417, which was on Foundation, was done in about July of this year. So, almost 100 Railscasts ago, he did this one. And really, from somewhere in the 300s, these Railscasts are very professional. I mean, this guy could be presenting anything. And he makes this stuff so easy to understand. And they're really tight. They're like 10 minutes long at most, I'd say. And a lot of information there and a lot of links. So there's 3 Railscasts I've mentioned, one for Paperclip, which was actually done very early. You can see he's developed his technique over time because they're super polished by the end. The Bootstrap getting started guide is pretty good. This Twitter Bootstrap Rails stuff on GitHub is excellent. The Ruby Racer stuff, I was looking at that to see what this JavaScript accelerator actually did and find out why my build wasn't working, why V8, it uses V8 lib and stuff. Naming, I have to say, in Rails is fantastic. It's very imaginative and a lot of fun. The paperclip stuff was pretty good. As I said, I've got an update to make or suggest. The foundation stuff, I've got to show you because it's just brilliant. Their getting started is really nice. Their super clean look translates to all this. If you actually say this top menu bar, this is what I was looking at today. So I just cut this out, pasted it into my HTML, and changed my titles around and stuff, and had my working menu bar. And if you wanted a nav bar, if you wanted to stick the nav bar to the bottom, or you wanted to have like side navigation or anything like that, there's all examples in here, and you can just, how to reposition the bar, how to constrain it and stuff like that. This is so clearly laid out, really easy to use without any time at all. And that goes to all of these things that I've looked at. I will say installing was buried for some reason. Installing on Rails is buried under applications. I don't know why it wouldn't be in getting started. But that's the only gripe I had. But it was easy enough to find. And so just tells you how to set the thing up. And the thing I sort of just assumed was it's always best to use the gem and then run the install afterwards, rather than doing, anytime you see manual, you're into a lot of hacking, whereas the gem just takes care of it for you and does it right. So that's one thing I like. And
Is it one that, you have to make sure that the gem, you've done what, I think you've done what you, like, what's good is to make sure that the gem is, like, people work on the gem, like, it's active.
yes,
You
that's
were checking that out.
kind of the first thing I do, is just find out when the last check-in was, because everything else has changed around them, all right? So, Foundation can be quite happy, and then somebody changes paperclip, and they change Rails, in the new version of Rails, and then they're very unhappy. So I always went from, okay, when was Rails last updated, right? Then the gems are more recent than that, then I'll feel pretty good about it. And I also do a quick check of who's griping about what on Stack Overflow. And that's, how did I get my, where is it again? Where's my presentation gone? I can't believe I keep losing it. I was just on the last page, and I went navigated, didn't I? Can I navigate back? I don't think I can do that from here. That'd be so good, wouldn't it? Oh, God. All right, there we go. So basically that's it. Thank you very much for persevering through that rather painful demo. But I found it very enlightening, and I want to go off and use Foundation now, and definitely I'll be thinking about sticking my data in, particularly after I've done the core data class with Jeff. I'll just be trying to stick everything in Rails databases now.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.